AI is everywhere, from ChatGPT to Gemini to DALL-E 2. It's everywhere and it's getting more and more accessible. The technology itself is getting better every day. As a developer, you need to also leverage some of these tools to improve your workflow. And in this video, I'll be talking about GitHub Copilot, what it is, 5 tips you can use to improve your workflow. So let's get right into it. What is GitHub Copilot? GitHub Copilot is a tool that works as an AI pair programmer, where two developers are working on code at the same time, and then one offers suggestions while the other person is writing the code, and they go back and forth between themselves. So GitHub Copilot does a similar thing too, where it watches as you're coding and then offers suggestions along the way. GitHub Copilot goes beyond code completion because it does with context. Back in the day, we had code snippets in our editor where you could type a prompt and then you get suggestions for different snippets, and when you select one, you essentially get boilerplate code. So GitHub Copilot goes beyond that. It takes into account the context in which you're coding and offers code completion within that context. Let's go into 5 tips that you can use to improve your workflow with GitHub Copilot. The first one is to use meaningful names for your variables and functions. Just like a human programmer, there are certain code you've written in the past and you come back a year later and it's hard to understand what is going on. Some of the time is that your variable names were not the best. This happens especially early on in your career when you're still learning about programming. Even as an experienced developer, you still need to use meaningful names. The same thing applies with GitHub Copilot. So you can write code like this, and we are creating a variable called foo. And then because it doesn't know what this variable is supposed to be, it's offering me a suggestion for a number. So it's assuming that it's a number, and I can go between the suggestions, and none of them is what I have in mind. So this time, if I offer create formatted date time, it offers a suggestion based off this date time variable, and I look at it and I can accept, and yeah, you can see that this is based off this, and then I can make adjustments as I deem fit. Alright, same thing applies for functions and for methods as well. I have this code here where I'm fetching block data, and then I get a ref to Firestore because I'm using Firestore for the database. I read the data from Firebase and then check if it exists and then get the data out. And one of the things I'm doing here is to get the meta description, to compute the meta description. So I could decide to move this code out of here by creating a method. So I'll call it function format meta description. And because he understands the context in which I'm writing, and then he knows about this code already, it simply offers me a suggestion for that same code. And now I can come here and replace this entire block with, in fact, it offers me a suggestion of what I can replace it with, and that is that. Now, whether this is for variables, methods, or even components, it's still the same idea. The way this works is, if you think about a human interaction, when you need a developer, to add some new code or refactor something, you tell them what should be done. With Copilot, the same thing applies to. You need to tell it what you need done. So I can create a new file here called blockcard and tell it to generate code for this component. So I can say something like generate code for a block card component. It takes some time to look at the context and try to generate something. So I can look at it and say accept. Now we can look at the code. We see block card, we see an image, and then some inner content and all of this, and it's pretty good. But we can give it even more context for this prompt, because there are some things that may not be correct. For example, if you look at our existing code, we have the setup style and then we have TypeScript support. So we can also get rid of this and then try again. So this time I'll tell it to generate code for block card components in view 3 script setup style with TS support. Now, the more specific you get with your prompts, the better the suggestions you will get. So then we have the same code and we see a similar suggestion, and now we can see that we have the view 3 setup style and we have all of this. And now you can adjust the boilerplates to actual working code. You can add even more context to these components. So again, take this out and then we'll say generate blog component that receives props, image, title, short description, and link in view 3 script setup style with TS support. Alright, and once again we get that we missed the setup part, and again it's because AI is still developing, every day is improving, so sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it doesn't, but it helps you get a good start. The third tip is adding comments to your code. So one of the things that Copilot is good at is adding comments to your code or generating documentation for your code. So now going back to this previous function we wrote here, we can tell GitHub Copilot to generate some documentation for this method. You can do that with Command I, and then it gives you this inline chart. So you can type slash and you see this drop down. There are 4 examples, so you can ask it to add comments to explain how this code works, to fix if there's maybe a lint problem, or you can ask it to generate tests. So now in this case, we just need it to add doc. So I press doc, and then you see it just generates documentation for this, and it's pretty neat. The 4th tip is give Copilot context of what you're working on by opening relevant files. For example, if you are working on a project and going back to our sample code, we have these import statements here for dependencies that we have for this file. You can also open up dependencies so that it understands. Again, you can only see the files that are currently open. So when you open them up, you can see that there are variables here, and then that's why when it was generating this function, it could also import this as well. And the last tip that I use is the workspace agent. So you can use the workspace agent to ask GitHub Copilot about the code you're currently working on. Maybe you're just new on the project and there's existing code. You can ask it to help you to explain certain parts of the code. So going back to our boilerplate code, I have some code here that's fetching some block data, and I can ask Copilot to explain the highlighted code. A lot of the time is correct, but sometimes it does make mistakes, so you also have to be sure that it is responding to what you asked about. And on this occasion, it does actually give me a relevant answer. So the highlighted code is a view component written in JavaScript. It uses a async data function to fetch data asynchronously. It's retrieved by routes params, and then it does a step-by-step breakdown of the function. So quite good. Yeah, those are the 5 tips that I use, some of them more often than others, and they really help to improve the coding workflow. So is it worth it? First of all, Copilot is not a free tool. The individual plan is $10, the business plan is $19, and the enterprise plan is $39. As an individual, is it worth it? Depends on what you value. For me, I would say if you can afford it, then you should definitely try it out, because it does make you write code a lot faster, at the very least, and at best it helps you to understand the code you're writing better. It helps you to write better code, because beyond the things that I showed, you can also ask Copilot to refactor some code for you, and it does a good job sometimes to give you very good suggestions. Again, it's technology that is still getting better, still improving, so it can only get better. This version is the worst version of it, so it is definitely worth the money if you have it. And that's all for this video. If you liked it or you learned something new, please leave a like and subscribe. I'm putting out content about developer productivity, tech, startups, especially in Africa. If you're interested in that sort of thing, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.